Hey, this is Mark Henry, author of Dancing with Energy, Healing, Magic, and Mysticism. Well, today I'm going to be talking about the magic of the threshold. So, what exactly is a threshold? Well, since we exist in the material world, thresholds usually refer to physical borders or boundaries that separate two areas. They can be marked visually, but they're not impassable. For example, could be like the doorway from one room to another in your house. That's considered a threshold. But we'll get more about that in a second. But I don't want you also to think that it's just something visual or physical. It could be a threshold of consciousness. It could be a state of nature going in one out of a state. So that's basically what a threshold is. So why are we even talking about a threshold? Why is that important? We're talking about spirituality and magic. Well, because thresholds, since they are physical lines, they're also symbolic of magical and spiritual relationships and realities. Symbols are basically how we interact with spirits. For example, if any of you have been ever worked with angels, demons, other types of spirits, they usually have some type of sigil. So that would be an expression of a symbol. So it's really important when we're talking about thresholds, understanding that it in a way is a symbol or symbolic. It could also be mark out sacred space. For example, if you want to think of a circle as symbolic, whenever the witches do the magic circle, maybe of salt or some other type of substance, it isn't just a circle from geometry. What it actually is it is symbolic of protection from other forces that may intrude upon their work. So I guess you can think of the thresholds as, and it's also called liminal, and that comes from that word, I believe. First time I heard that word was learning about shamanism. So it's these thresholds connect two different existential planes, kind of the in between, not really there or not this or that. And thresholds typically appear in the occult in a few forms. For example, the whole idea of the crossroads, the meeting at a crossroads. When you think of those types of things, it's or let me just say the cross, intersection of the spiritual material world. I know in Christianity it is the intersection of heaven and earth, the cross symbolized by Jesus the God-man. But apart from Christianity and the cross, the whole crossroads idea is the intersection where one can communicate with spirit, one can, it's a place to do magic. It can be a place where typically offerings, after you've offered it, certain things to spirits and you're ready to dispose of it, usually you will dispose of it at a crossroads. Not necessarily exclusively, but it is one of your options. Getting back to doorways. So when we're talking about thresholds, there's the doorways. When first time I heard of the word threshold, by the way, is when when I was little, you hear about, okay, two people getting married, and marriage is a type of ritual, a ceremony, and when the marriage takes place, the couple goes to a hotel on their honeymoon, and the guy carries the bride across the threshold. And what happens after they carve through the threshold into the hotel room? They have sex and consummate the marriage, and all of that. If I remember correctly from my history, I don't know if it's true, but that was at one point whether a marriage was enforced about whether it was consummated, and that happens after the carrying of the threshold. So it's kind of an interesting connection. But I don't want to get too far into that. So also think there's something that I became aware of not too long ago. There's something called the doorway effect. And what that means, psychologists have been studying this for I want to say maybe a decade. It is the process of when someone walks from one place to another and they go through a threshold, like a doorway, that it creates this effect on the memory. For example, have you ever intended to get something in the grocery store, then as soon as you walk through the door at Winn-Dixie, Walmart, or wherever you go shopping, and you realize that you can't quite remember what it was? That is the doorway effect. It adversely affects memory. And I don't think it exclusively can be grocery shopping. Have you ever went and intended to get something out of the next room, and then you go through the door, and then you're like fuzzy about what exactly it was, or maybe you got distracted, started thinking about other things? It may not have been because you have ADHD necessarily. It could be because of this doorway effect. There's something about doorways where there's that gap that affects us in a specific way. Also, that's one of the reasons why in path workings, in meditations, the really powerful ones include a doorway from one state to another. Somebody would say, if you look at the psychological aspect of ritual, the doorway that leads one into the astral or leads one into another dimension. There's a reason why that doorway or that visualization of a doorway is there, because of this threshold type of thing. Now we're talking about meditation. There's thresholds too. There is, in some forms of meditation and mindfulness, and even some Buddhist meditations, they instruct the student to focus on the gap between the thoughts. Threshold. Focus on the space in between your breath. It's a threshold. It is that in-between state. It is also what some people consider the void. And in that space, there is a magic there. By entering that space, you can acquire a lot of peace and a lot of harmony. Other types of thresholds of time. If any of y'all are familiar with Celtic witchcraft, you understand the whole idea of October 31st and the Sabbath of Samhain, where it's the end of the Celtic New Year and the beginning of a new one. So at that point, at that threshold of time, it is believed that the veil between the living and the dead is the thinnest, and that one can more easily communicate with spirits. It would be a good time to do magic, to maybe give offerings to your ancestors. It is an auspicious time to do a lot of things that are spiritual and or pagan. You could also think of threshold of time regarding ritual. So there are people that will do their particular rituals, perhaps spells, at dawn. Dawn it's where the night becomes the day. In that period of time where things are transitioning is thought to be a very powerful time to do your work, to do your spiritual work. Now that I've mentioned all these examples and described what the magic of the threshold is, what can one do about it? Well, I want you to become aware, if you are somebody who is practicing magic or any other type of spirituality, where there may be a threshold in your work. If there is, it's a good idea to keep it. If you like to create your own self-styled rituals, be creative, include thresholds in your visualizations, in your meditations, in your work. You will find that it helps things move from one state to another. And that is basically it. That is the thresholds. If you so desire, I'm going to put some links at the bottom. Please subscribe and like, and I hope to see you in a future video. So take care and have a good weekend.